Hey everyone, how's it going? So as you may have noticed, I have spent the past few months off YouTube. As it turns out, pandemic is not the most opportune time for a broke university student to take cool trips. So there hasn't really been too much to show, but I'm excited to say that after 18 months of a pandemic, I've finished school, I've taken a couple shots, drank more Tim Hortons than anyone should legally be allowed to have, and I'm ready to travel again. And that's what makes today so exciting, because after 18 months, I'm finally getting to pull out my passport again and take an international trip. With the Netherlands opening their borders almost fully to vaccinated Canadians, WestJet recently launched 787 service between Vancouver and Calgary. And that's the flight I'm going to be taking today. After hopping over from where I'm at now in Vancouver, I'm going to be boarding WestJet 787 in Calgary for the 8-ish hour trip over to the Netherlands. That's going to kick off about a week or so of solo travels through Europe that should put me on the return flight back to Calgary in about a week. That is, unless the Netherlands border guards reject my Moderna Pfizer COVID vaccine mix, or I run out of money, or Europe closes their borders, or Canada changes their entry restrictions, or I get hit by a bike in Amsterdam. In this video, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what WestJet's international service offering looks like now in economy in September 2021, and I'm also going to give a little bit of insight into my experience flying internationally, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the challenges you might face. Now, obviously, entry restrictions are changing every week, but hopefully my experience can give you a little bit of insight into what traveling is like these days, and answer some of the questions you might have about flying internationally. So strap in, stay tuned, and let's go to Amsterdam. So this here is the international side of Calgary's airport. This terminal opened back in 2016 and still looks clean, bright, and fresh. As we're the only international flight leaving tonight, it's also pretty empty. There was a bit of a lineup for a documents check at check-in, but because I already had my boarding pass, I went right through to security. Now, as nice as this terminal looks, I was a bit disappointed to see that almost all of the food options were closed even though it was only 7:30. I say almost because there were 3 open Chili's I saw around the airport, which seems to have a monopoly on dinnertime food at YYC.
Hi, welcome to Chili's.
Finding an outlet was also next to impossible, though there were a lot of great places to lounge. Now, you may be wondering what check-in and boarding look like for an international flight with all the restrictions and required forms. To enter the Netherlands, aside from your passport, you need to bring 2 completed forms with you. One is a vaccine declaration and the other is a health questionnaire. If you aren't fully vaccinated, you also need to show a negative test result. These are all checked by WestJet either at check-in at Calgary, hence the long line, or before boarding if you're a connecting passenger. Everything you need to board can be found on your airline's website, so I recommend you give that a check before you set out. Once these forms were checked by the gate agents, you're given a check mark on your boarding pass and you're good to go. It was a bit of a chaotic scene around the gate as hundreds of us filled out forms or had our boarding passes checked, but it paid off in the end as it made our customs process in Amsterdam incredibly easy.
Thanks so much.
After all this, it was time to board our 787. I really like the look of WestJet 787. I think the cool teal and blue tones look great, especially in that mood lighting. The seats are pretty tight, but still comparable to what you'd find on Air Canada and quite comfortable. There's an adjustable headrest and a large in-flight entertainment screen that you can tilt if the person in front of you reclines. There's a USB charging port and universal outlet between the seats, all pretty standard stuff for long-haul economy. I will say there are a few weird quirks to this seat. The table is pretty low and small, and the pocket for safety cards is incredibly deep. I accidentally put my phone in there and took me about 2 minutes to try to fish it out. There was a pillow and blanket sitting at the seat waiting for me when I boarded, which went pretty unused through the flight because the cabin was kept pretty warm, and a pet peeve of mine, there were no air vents to cool down. They did drop the temperature down a little bit during the flight, but I still would have liked having the option to cool myself down with an air vent if they had one. After waiting for everyone's documents to get checked and to board, we were pushing back and taxiing out for a reasonably on-time departure.
N'hésitez pas à communiquer avec nous si vous avez besoin d'aide.
8 hours, 1 minute, up to 35,000 feet initially, and then climbing higher once we burn off some fuel. We are expecting a pretty smooth ride this evening. There's been some turbulence over northern Saskatchewan into Manitoba, and we'll do our best to find smooth air. Latest weather at the airport in Amsterdam, it's 12 degrees right now, looking at a few clouds for our arrival. Once we're in range, we'll update you our weather report and our estimate arrival at the gate. Enjoy the flight.
So now that we're airborne and waiting for whatever they're serving for dinner because I didn't feel like chilies, and apparently that disqualifies me from eating in Calgary, let's check out the Wi-Fi options. I actually didn't purchase internet on this flight, but I did on the way back, and I can confirm it works pretty alright. Decent speeds for messaging and browsing, with a few bad spots on the way, which you might expect on a long flight like this. It was a little bit overpriced, but still fairly reasonable compared to Air Canada or other North American airlines. Moving on to the in-flight entertainment system itself, I thought it had a solid selection of movies and TV shows. It's a modern interface and a decently big screen. As I mentioned earlier, I really like the fact that you can tilt it and that it's got 2 headphone jacks. My only issues with the system were that you have to navigate through quite a few pages to adjust the screen brightness or even turn on your overhead light because there's no button, which can be a bit annoying if you're in the middle of a movie or watching a show. About an hour after takeoff, dinner, if you can call it that, was served. I'm gonna say it's not quite what I was expecting. Unfortunately, WestJet just serves this very small snack box of a half wrap and Kit Kat bar for their dinner service. I'm starting to really regret passing up all those chilies in Calgary. Although this felt more like what you'd see on a low-cost carrier, they did still serve drinks, including free alcohol, along with some pretzels afterwards, which was nice to see. After our dinner/midnight snack service, it was time to lean back and try to get some sleep. When I woke up, we were flying over Iceland and a couple hours from landing. Unlike almost every legacy carrier, it turns out WestJet's bigger meal is actually their breakfast. Not much bigger, mind you, but we were served an actual tray of a very small heated frittata or egg scramble, along with a muffin, water, fruit, and yogurt. It would have been nice to see a slightly larger hot main, but it's still way better than nothing. I had some of WestJet's signature McDonald's coffee, and not too long after, we were starting our descent down into Amsterdam for an on-time arrival. As for some final thoughts for the flight itself, I definitely enjoyed my time on WestJet 787. They've got a solid hard product, and even though it's a bit tight, it's on par if not slightly better to what their competitor is offering in economy. A bit more broadly, I think WestJet is in kind of a bit of a weird spot right now. Although their business product has grown leaps and bounds in the past couple years, in economy they're still riding the line between low cost and high service. They still sell cheap one-way flights and give out tiny snack-like meals, but at the same time their hard product is a fierce competitor to Air Canada's. As always, I think a huge difference comes down to the crew, and the cabin crew on this flight were attentive, friendly, and courteous as ever. It'll be interesting to see how the airline plays the next few years, and as they eye some big network expansions into next summer, I wish them and all their employees nothing but the best.
Welcome to Amsterdam. The local time here is 1:21. As we taxi to the gate, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened and carry-on items.
As I mentioned before, the process from here on out was more or less exactly what it was before COVID. I was expecting to at least have to show my forms again, but because those were checked in Calgary, the border guards here in Amsterdam didn't seem to care. A couple questions, a stamp, and I was in the Netherlands. As long as you organize your forms and any tests you need pretty early, international travel these days is mind-blowingly easy. The last thing I wanted to touch on doesn't really have anything to do with the flight review itself, but I think it's something that's going to stick with me the most from this flight. And that's the energy that I felt on board. I genuinely don't think I've ever been on a plane so excited as this one. Everywhere around you could hear people talking with their seatmates about travel plans, sharing stories, and laughing. After 18 months inside Canada, the relief shared by 300 people so excited to go on vacation was an incredible thing to see. Given how easy the border crossing process was, and especially as rules begin to loosen, I really hope we can see more people taking their first steps outside of their countries as things slowly begin to shift back towards normal. I can confirm that it is just as fun as it always was. In any case, huge thank you to the WestJet team for such a great flight over, and of course thank you to everyone for watching. Really hoping I can get some more videos out as soon as there's more worth sharing. All the support really is appreciated. Take care, everyone.